Welcome back to the channel, and I haven't posted a vlog in over 2 months, so let's talk about where the hell I've been.
Since I've last seen you guys, I've made some major moves in life, and I also have some big announcements to talk about, so let's dive right in.
As I've explained in my previous vlogs, I own over 500 acres of rice fields, and in my last video, I broke down the entire process of how the rice is planted. So now that the rice is fully grown, the only thing left to do is harvest it, so let's see how that goes down. We use these giant harvesters as seen from the drone to separate the rice from the stalk. These combines travel at a whopping speed of 2 to 3 miles per hour, which is why it took us the entire month of October to harvest the rice. The rice then gets transferred from the harvester to a bank out, which loads the rice in these massive trailers set off to the sides of each field. And to provide you guys some context, each trailer holds over 50,000 pounds of rice. The trailers are then picked up by a truck and sent off to the mill for drying and storage. I'm thrilled to share that our crop produced over 4.5 million pounds of rice, which was awesome to see. And to make the end of the year even a little more exciting, just a few days after rice season ended, my second child was born. So for the entire months of November and December, my sole focus has been spending time with family and enjoying the holidays, which is why poker has taken a back seat. But now that rice season is over and my wife and kids are healthy and settled in, it's time to get back to what every one of you are here for. Watching these vlogs so you can critique my subpar poker play and monotone voice. But before we dive into the poker, something crazy happened in the local poker community that I never would have expected, but I'm happy to share it with you guys.
I'm super excited to announce that I'll be taking my talents to the one and only Stones Gambling Hall.
Showtime!
Stones is where I got my start in live poker nearly 5 years ago, and I strictly played there for 3 straight years. I was mainly grinding the 1-2 game, but after I decided to start the vlog at the end of 2023, they didn't allow filming at the time, which is why I spent most of my time playing at Capital Casino this year. However, before I took my break to harvest rice, they reached out to me because they loved the channel and saw the benefit it could provide. So they've granted me full permission to produce poker content, which I'm super excited and thankful for. Playing and filming at Stones was always the dream since I started this vlog, and I can't wait to get this new journey started and call Stones Gambling Hall home sweet home once again.
It's been over 2 months since I've even touched a deck of cards, so we're definitely going to be rusty. So for this week, we're just going to chill and have some fun in the 1-2 game to hopefully get our swagger back. See what happens.
But before we dive into this week's sessions, I gotta announce that I'm giving away $500 on the Club GG app. This is by far my biggest giveaway on this channel, so if you want all the info, click the Club GG link in the description below to join. We buy into the 1-2 game for the max of $300, and we don't waste any time before getting in on the action. There's one limp in front of me, and I look down at A7 of hearts and make it $10 to go. Next act calls, small blind calls, and the limper calls, so we're going 4 ways to a flop. Flop comes out 8-5-5 with 2 hearts, giving us the nut flush draw. The small blind takes the betting lead and throws out a bet of $15. Most players wouldn't lead out with the 5 in this spot and would rather check raise, so I'm either putting him on a worse flush draw or top pair at best. He has about $120 left in his stack, so let's turn up the heat. I raise to $50 and everyone else gets out of the way. Action's back on the small blind. He goes deep in the tank, but eventually tosses his hand in the muck, saying that he had an 8. I like fast playing these draws when our opponent's range is capped, because being the pre-flop aggressor, our hand looked like it was an overpair that wanted to stack off. Pretty nice to scoop in our first pot in over 2 months. Next hand up, a player in early position opens the action to $10, and a couple people putting the call in front of me. I'm in the cutoff and look down at 7-6 of spades and call as well. 4 ways to a flop, which comes out ace-5-4 with 2 spades, giving us the straight flush draw. Action gets checked all the way to me, and with my million out draw, I throw out a bet of $20 to either take it down now or build up a huge pot if I hit. Original raiser calls, and so does next to act, so I figure at least one of them has an ace. Pot's up to $100, and the turn peels off the king of clubs. Checks to me again, and if this was heads up, I might try to steal it with the big bet, but since I put at least one of them on an ace, I don't think I have any fold equity, so I check it back to realize my equity. Going to a river looking for any 3, 8, or spade, but it comes out the queen of hearts. Original raiser bets some amount, and when it gets over to me, I show the table my beautiful 7-high hand and toss it right in the muck. Lost a few bucks from that last hand, so our stack is sitting below the max for now. For this one, I look down at King Queen of Hearts and raise it up to $10. We get one caller from the button, and now the big blind raises to $45. Everyone else gets out of the way, and if this was offsuit, I'd probably toss my hand in the muck, but since it's suited and I have position, there's just no way I'm folding. I toss in the extra $35 and the button gets out of the way. Heads up to a flop with $100 in the middle, and we get a pretty favorable flop of King 9-4 with 2 clubs, giving us top pair second best kicker. He throws out a c-bet of $35, which is what I would assume he'd do with his entire range. We put in the chips, and pot's now up to $170, and the turn pairs the board with a 4 of hearts. Our opponent doesn't slow down and decides to bet around half pot for $80. I think if he had a hand like 10s, jacks, or queens, he'd probably check. So with this bet, he's saying he either has ace-king, aces, a set of 9s, or a bluff. Against tighter opponents, I might actually fold this hand, but this player is definitely capable of running a bluff, so I put in the call once more. River comes out a pretty big blank in the 8 of spades, and to my surprise, our opponent now slows down and checks. My thought was pretty simple here. We already decided he doesn't have a pair lower than a king, so he either has us beat the entire way and wants us to bluff a missed flush draw, or he has a bluff and just gave up. I don't see a point in value betting, so I check it back, and our opponent says he has nothing, and I fast roll the winner. Always nice to pick up a sizable pot early on in the session. After this hand, we unfortunately went card dead for a bit, but after a few orbits, we finally picked up a playable hand. Under the gun opened to $12 and got a call from the player next to him. I'm in early position and look down at ace-jack offsuit. Sometimes I would 3-bet with this hand, but I haven't seen the original raiser get 2 out of line all day, so I decided to just call and see a flop. 4 other people think $12 is a fair price, so they put in the chips and we're going 7 ways to a flop. I get about all I could ask for when the flop comes out ace-queen 3 with 2 diamonds, giving us top pair solid kicker. Luckily action gets checked to me, and with $80 in the middle, I think we have a green light to bet. I decide on a sizing of $35, which I was pretty happy with. A lot of 1-2 players will fold a weak ace to a big bet, so it's important to not bet too big to keep in the hands that you have dominated in the draws as well. Surprisingly, everyone else gets out of the way, except the player to my right. I figured he'd raise his ace-3 and pocket-3 holdings, so it's safe to say we have the best hand for now. Pot's sitting at 150, and we're going heads up to a turn which peels off the 3 of hearts, pairing the board. He checks it over, and he doesn't have too much left in his stack, so I decide to put him all in. He doesn't call right away, so I think we could take all his ace-x hands off the table, because usually those will snap call now that they have a queen kicker. He eventually does put in the call, and I'm mainly putting him on a flush draw. River isn't a good one, and the 8 of diamonds bringing in the front door flush. I was expecting to lose, but after a few moments, our opponent looks at the board and tosses his hand in the muck. Only thing I could imagine he had is a non-believing queen. Finally gained some momentum on the day, and we're up over $230. For this next one, under the gun opens the action to $10, the button puts in the call, and I'm in the small blind and look down at the Cowboys, pocket kings. I usually 3-bet to over $50 in this spot since I'm out of position, but at 1-2 where stacks aren't too deep, I want to bet a size that will get called. I settle on a sizing of $40, and surprisingly, both players put in the chips. Going 3 ways to a flop out of position and get a jack-3 deuce rainbow board, giving us the overpair. When 2 pairs should never be represented, and there are minimal draws, you should always bet relatively small to the pot so you could keep all the pairs lower than a jack in. I throw out a little less than a third size bet of $35, and both players muck right away. But no complaints here, taking down an easy $80 in profit, and the player to my left said that he had pocket 3s that would have flopped middle set and had us crushed. That's why I always advocate to never trap with big pairs and always 3-bet them for value. Under the gun opens to $12 and next stack puts in the call. I'm in early position and look down at the ladies, pocket queens. I don't know if you guys watched my previous vlogs, but unlike throughout high school, I was picking up all the ladies. So we're trying to keep the momentum going and bloat up the pot. I 3-bet them to $45, and both players end up putting in the call. 3 ways in position with 135 in the middle, and the flop comes out ace-10-3 with 2 spades, giving us second pair. Under the gun decides to lead out for $35, which I found pretty odd, and now next to act raises to 110. When action's back on me, I think I have the easiest fold of my life. I toss it in the muck, and surprisingly, so does the under the gun player. For this next one, early position limps, and the cutoff raises to $17. He's been raising a lot of hands, so his range is pretty wide. Button decides to put in the call, and I'm in the small blind and put in the value squeeze to $65. Folds to the cutoff, who decides to muck, but we pick up a caller with the button. Double flats are usually pocket pairs or big Broadway cards. So keeping that in mind, we're going heads up to a pretty nice flop of Queen Jack 3 with 2 spades, giving us top pair, top kicker. I settle on a half pot bet of $75 to get value and charge all his draws. He puts in the call again, so the pot has doubled to $300, and our opponent has about $250 left in his stack. I'm putting him on a queen, ace-jack, king-10 or 10-9 for the straight draw, or a small flush draw since the queen and jack of spades are on the board and I have the ace of spades in my hand. Turn is an interesting one, and the ace of clubs giving us top 2 pair. To be totally honest, I actually hated that card because it makes it harder to get called by worse, and king-10 gets there for the straight. But I'm never checking in the spot since I need to get value from all his draws, so I throw out a super small bet in comparison to the pot of $90. I guess he doesn't think $90 is enough and goes all in. I snap call, and if he has king-10, then so be it. At least I have a few outs. I turn over my hand like I always do when I'm all in, and he shows king-queen offsuit, which we have dominated. River is clean, and we scoop in this massive pot just a couple hours into the session. Thank you. At this point in the session, I'm up over $660, and I've never booked over $1,000 in profit in my 1-2 career, so at the time, I made it my goal to pull this off. Remember a few hands ago when I said that you should never trap pre-flop and value 3-bet your monster hands? Well, I guess I was full of shit because I definitely don't take my own advice here. Under the gun opens the action to $12. When action's on me, I look down at the best hand in poker, which is none other than the bullets, pocket aces. I was thinking about what size to raise, but out of the corner of my eye, I see the player to my left stacking up his chips like he wants to 3-bet. So I go with the unorthodox play and just flat the $12. And just like we predicted, the hijack now puts in the raise to $42. Under the gun now calls the $42, and we're drawing up plays better than John Gruden in his prime.
6-step setup, and you're throwing the ball to the fullback on Spider 2Y banana.
Now that the trap's been set, there's no point in just calling, so I put in the 4-bet to $142. The hijack goes all in for his remaining stack, and under the gun decides to eventually fold. Now that the action's complete, I turn over my hand like I always do when I'm all in, and the hijack shows pocket 10s. The flop comes out ace-jack 4 rainbow, and we basically have him drawing dead, which we love to see. Turn and river are clean, and our trap worked out to perfection. After scooping in that massive pot, we're up over $950 and just $40 away from booking our first ever 4-figure profit and biggest win ever at 1-2. What could go wrong? In this next hand, I look down at ace-queen offsuit in the cutoff and raise it up to $12. Button and big blind both call, so with $35 in the middle, we go to a flop of queen jack 7 with 2 spades, giving us top pair, top kicker once again. Checks to me, and I throw out a value bet of $25. Guy to my left quickly calls, and now the big blind decides to put in a small raise to $65. The sizing seemed a little fishy to me because the value hands I could see him doing this with are pocket 7s and the occasional queen jack, which shouldn't be represented too often since I have a queen in our hand. I also figured pocket queens and pocket jacks would definitely 3-bet pre-flop, so I think this raise can be done with a ton of semi-bluffs. I don't want to flat and give the player to my left a nice price to hit his draw, so since the session is going so smooth and I feel like I'm ahead more often than not, I decide to ship it all in. Button quickly folds, and with zero hesitation at all, the big blind snap calls.
It was at this moment that Nathan knew. He fucked up.
I turn over my hand like I always do when I'm all in, and he shows
Queen Jack for top 2 pair. Gonna need some help with an ace and an ace only, but unfortunately we don't get there, and this overplay costs us a massive portion of our stack. So what was a $960 profit has now dwindled down to just $555 in one hand. Not my proudest moment, but having not played in over 2 months, I knew a dumb mistake was inevitable. Nothing to do than just keep grinding and pretty much pretend like I didn't just punt off a third of my stack. There's one limp in front of me, and I'm blessed to look down at the ladies once again, pocket queens. I open them to $15, and it folds over to the hijack, who now 3 bets to $50. Folds back to me, and since we're over 200 big blinds effective, I don't see the point in putting in a 4-bet since I don't think I could get action from worse. The range I put most 1-2 opponents on in a 3-bet pot is 10s plus, and ace-king, or sometimes ace-queen, even though I'm blocking it. So I decided to just put in the smooth call, and with $100 in the middle, the flop comes out 8-7-5 with 2 hearts, giving us the overpair. I check, and he decides to throw out the same bet of $50. Easy call since I'm obviously never folding, and pot's now doubled to 200. Turn is safe, and the 5 of clubs pairing the board, and once again I start off with a check. He doesn't slow down, and now throws in a pretty hefty bet for 1-2 of $125. I figured his ace-king and ace-queen hands would shut down to see a free river, so now I'm putting him on 10s plus. We could beat 10s and jacks, but we're losing to kings and aces. Not loving this spot too much, but I'm just never folding on this turn. I quickly put in the chips, and the pot's now up to $450. The river is an interesting one, and the 9 of diamonds, which puts 4 to a straight, and neither of our ranges should consist of that too often. I check again, and luckily our opponent decides to check it back. I turn him over, and he shows pocket jacks, which is one of the pairs we could beat. If he would have jammed the river, it actually would have been a pretty tough spot, but I'm perfectly fine with the result and how I played it.
Thank you.
Got a little momentum back with that hand, and our profit is up to $775, which is nice to see, especially after botching that ace-queen hand. A few orbits go by before we get back into the crazy action of this game. For this hand, there's 3 limps in the field before I look down at jack 9 of diamonds in the small blind. I don't think there's a point in bloating up the pot out of position with this hand, so I just call for $1 more to see a cheap flop. But now the big blind bumps up the price of poker to $17. The under the gun limper calls, and so does every other player that put in chips. So it's not my favorite hand to play from the small blind, but to only have to call $15 more to win a pot of 85, I'm just never folding. I put in the chips, and we're going 5 ways to a flop of jack 9-8 rainbow, giving us top 2 pair. Something I've been working on when I'm out of position is leading out in multi-way pots instead of checking to the pre-flop aggressor. I actually like it better than going for the check raise because we ensure the flop won't get checked through and we take the betting lead ourselves. So I throw out a $45 bet and the pre-flop raiser decides to fold, but we do get action from the under the gun player. Since he had players left to act behind him, I don't think he has a set since he'd probably raise that to not give the other players a good price to draw. So I think he either has the stone cold nuts and doesn't mind letting anyone call, or a combo draw with a 10 in it and wants to hit their outs. So I'm either way ahead or way behind. Pot's now up to $170, and the turn comes out the 4 of hearts, which shouldn't change anything, but it does bring out a backdoor flush possibility. Our opponent has $230 left in his stack, so I think jamming would be an overplay, so I decide to bet an amount that I think a 10 will call. I settle on a sizing of $80, and without much hesitation, he puts in the chips. I'm hoping to fade a queen or a 7, and we do, but the river brings out an interesting one in the ace of diamonds. I'm now losing to ace-jack, but I think he has a ton more 10x in his range. This wasn't my preferred river card because I put him on a hand like jack 10 or 10-9, so it's gonna be hard for him to call a bet. There's $330 in the pot, and I decide to throw out a super small bet of $15. I just want a crying call from a 1-pair holding, and maybe he'll take this as weakness and throw in a bluff. Our opponent doesn't call the $15, but instead raises to $50. Never folding for this price, so I snap call, and our opponent turns over 10-9 offsuit for 3rd pair, and our 2 pair's obviously good. Super happy with how I read the situation, and I think I was able to get max value all 3 streets. That was our last interesting hand of the day, so let's get to the outro. I think it's safe to say the 1-2 game at Stones might be the craziest in the entire state. In for only 300 and out for $1,325 for my biggest 1-2 win ever of 1,025. Hopefully tomorrow goes just as smooth. I came back the next day, but to be totally honest with you guys, I didn't play in one pot over $100 and I had 0 interesting hands. If I showed you guys this session, I'm almost positive I'd lose over half of my subscribers and I wouldn't even blame you for it. That's how card dead I was despite the game still being pretty good. I got stuck $90 early on and I had to add on 100 at one point, but I was able to battle back and scoop in a few small pots to book a whopping profit of $53. I'll take that any day of the week and twice on Sunday. That was the last poker session we played this week, so let's dive into the weekly results. Despite not playing live poker for over 2 months, we were able to book 2 out of 2 winning sessions, and we currently have a 9-session profit streak dating back to early September, which is the longest of my poker career. I played a total of 8 hours and 15 minutes of live poker this week and profited $1,078 for an hourly win rate of over 130 at 1-2, which is flat out insane. Just goes to show how crazy the 1-2 game here at Stones is. This next video will be our last vlog of 2024, and I'll go over some year-end results, so keep an eye out for it. Thanks for watching, and as always, I hope you guys run good at the tables, and I'd appreciate it if you could hit the subscribe button to help me reach my new year-end goal of 10,000 subscribers.